if somebody is going to try to manipulate you, there are two pretty good ways to do it. They can either instill fear in you and get you to make decisions based on that fear, or they can instill hope in you and get you to make decisions based on that hope. Both of those things are pure emotion, and there's no way out. Dear Brother with Alex and Marc is brought to you by absolutely no one.
The intro man.
All right, I'm the intro man. All right, well, with that, welcome to today's podcast. This week we've decided we are going to talk about journalism and media, which is a lofty topic. And what might be interesting about this is that Alex and I, we probably, and I don't know this for sure, but we probably agree on most things, but we likely disagree on certain aspects of it. So this should be an interesting conversation. I think I'm going to try to resist my tendency to take the opposing view, even if I don't believe it, because I like to do that a lot. So we'll see how that goes. Well, fascinating indeed. Yeah. All right. Well, with that, journalism and media. So I guess we should start off with some definitions, and it's probably best because this is an opinionated conversation that we should ask each other what we think those are. So I'll ask you first, Alex. What do you think journalism and media are?
What journalism and media are now, or what they should be?
Well, see, but that's an interesting point of discussion. But I think what they let's start with what they should be, or what they are as they are defined, and not necessarily as they are currently, maybe.
To me, journalism should be reporting of the facts with no opinionated slant on anything. Just the facts, and let the person who's receiving those facts form their own opinion. Okay. Media, to me, is more of an entertainment thing. And I think what's happening now is they've overlapped, and there's like a fuzzy gray area between the two. And I don't like it.
Okay. I don't totally disagree. But I believe that journalism kind of has multiple facets, in my view. And while journalism's job across all of its facets is to report the facts, I believe it's also to do so with editorial authority. And what I mean by that is you have, within the organization that's responsible for the journalism, you've got the ability through experience and maybe just experience anyway, the ability to form a narrative that is true because it is supported by the facts. So in the old days where you'd have one person reading the news from one organization, and people would only get that news from maybe one or two sources, that editorial authority was important because sometimes the facts can be difficult to coalesce into a thing. The media is, I guess, as it relates to journalism, is a conduit for journalism. Media is all things that are the form of communication that we use in order to express journalism, but also lots of other things too. So entertainment and misinformation, etc. So media, this is media right now. What we're doing is not journalism, but we are now participating in media. Social media is media, even the name. Cable television, radio, books, newspapers, magazines. And journalism kind of crosses the barrier within media. So like automotive journalism, investigative journalism, entertainment journalism, all those things are journalism. And so journalism is a thing that lives within media. and media is the overarching, I guess, conduit for that information.
Okay.
Okay. So I think the only part where we disagree, and maybe we don't disagree entirely, but the only part where we've diverged is whether or not journalism should provide merely facts and nothing more, or if they should provide facts supporting an editorial authoritative narrative. But that can be dangerous, right? Because you have to trust the authority in order to be able to accept their narrative.
Right. To me, I still read newspapers, or occasionally I read a newspaper. I get the newspaper on the weekends, and it's the local newspaper here on Long Island, Newsday. And while it, how do I say this? Yeah, I just want facts. Right? I want to read, hey, this is what happened. These are the things that happened. This is the person. This is the time. I want the facts. Mm-hmm. And then from that information, I take and form my own opinion. I don't like reading someone else's opinion unless it's a known, if they come out and say, hey, this is an editorial. This is my opinion, and we're printing it because we want to. Okay, cool. But as far as news stories go and just reporting on the news, I prefer just facts and let me formulate my own opinion. Because I feel like the situation that we're in now with the whole country is people are, they watch, Fox News and CNN, and those are two very biased forms of media, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, CNN skews left, Fox News skews right, and they put their spin the way they want to. You can watch the same coverage of an event on both channels, because I do that regularly just for shits and giggles, just to see the difference, and it's incredible.
I totally agree, and I think one of the things that I thought of when you were talking is not, maybe it's not necessarily a narrative that's important. What's important is context. I think that sometimes facts can be delivered that don't have any real meaning, unless we're talking about like an event that occurred, like a fire or a car accident or a murder or some sort of event that occurred that's very simple, like altercation happened between two people did X, Y, and Z, they were over here, the who, what, where, why, and how of journalism, right? That's the basic tenets of what journalism is. Give me the facts of the event. But for events or for things that span time and that require a level of understanding, there's context that's important, I think. And I think that one of the things that lacks, or that is lacking in journalism today, is context. We do not get a lot of context for what's going on, and therefore we can either form our own opinions or we can be given the opinions of others. And I think that's what you're describing, right? So there's no question that over the last 30 plus years that journalism has decided to take sides and pick slants.
Yeah.
For a lack of context.
Yeah. And I think that's a result of these, all news channels, right? Because, you're broadcasting news 24 hours a day. There's only so much news that you can broadcast until you have to start putting a spin on it so you get ratings, right? I watch my local news, and I think they do a pretty decent job of staying down the line, reporting, hey, this is what happened, this is what's going on. No real editorial spin on it. Mm-hmm. Because you got a half-hour slot to fill. Hey, quick points. This guy did this happened, this one's on fire went out, blah, 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 end of story, move on. Whereas when you have these 24-hour news cycles, it's entertainment. It's MTV.
Well,
pretty much.
Right.
It's news MTV.
And I did a little bit of fact finding before this conversation, just so I could get a better view on things. And I didn't realize that CNN as an organization was founded in 1980. Fox News 1996 and MSNBC 1996. So in effect, CNN had been the only 24-hour news station in existence for a number of years going back to 1980. Some other 24-hour news stations came and went through that time until 1996, where then Fox and MSNBC came on board, and then we got what was effectively the big three 24-hour news, cable news stations. And I've always viewed the sea change in cable news as 9/11, where that was an event that I think every single one of us was sort of grateful that there was 24-hour news for. Right? We all, we were enthralled in one way or another. We were enthralled by the goings on, and we wanted details, and we wanted them fast, and we wanted to know right away what was going on, what happens next, what's the next thing, what's the answer. But in some kind of strange way, what happened after that, in my view, is that the news stopped operating on that schedule. Right, the world started slipping back to a normal cadence, and there wasn't this 24-hour news requirement any longer. People weren't up at 3:00 in the morning looking for the next bit of information. So these news channels needed to fill that space, and they did so with commentary, opinion, talking heads, as it were, just filling that space, programming, as it were. And then it conflated the two. It conflated journalism and reporting with what was supposed to be, opinion, but which turned into a form of entertainment.
Right.
And now people get their news, and this is a wild assumption because I don't know this to be true. People get their news from either one of these sources. Most people, I don't think, flip back and forth. I do the same. I flip back and forth. I want to see what everybody says, but I don't think most people do that. I think most people pick one, they stick with it, they listen to it, and they get whatever they get, which is dangerous.
Yep.
So let's talk about maybe. So you've identified your primary news sources, right? So you read the local newspaper. Occasionally you watch the local news, and then you watch the cable news stations alternately, right? Yeah,
when there's like a major event, obviously when the president was in the hospital,
mm-hmm.
and then his subsequent release, those events were flip back and forth days,
right?
Just to see, Fox News covering him as the triumphant hero returning from the hospital, and look at him go, and he's up on the balcony, it's amazing,
Mussolini.
He's so inspiring. And then CNN with, he's so irresponsible, what is he doing, this is ridiculous,
right?
And watching them back and forth was entertainment, because that's what I know it to be. Yes, there's facts, but it's entertainment.
Do you feel that you are well informed?
No, not as well as I could be.
Interesting.
I find that in my world, right? When I say my world, I mean the world of a parent, just 2 small kids, work full time. There's not a lot of free time, right? Just my days are swamped. I find that in order to be well informed without relying on these forms of media and journalism, you have to dig to find unbiased opinions and just straight up information. Like NPR does a pretty good job of being
straight,
unbiased, right? Pretty straight.
I agree.
Straight down the line. Hey, this is what's going on. Here's some information, and they do a pretty damn good job of providing just that information. It's not just what happened, but they give you some context and background.
Yeah,
and they give you a lot of good info, and then you can take from that what you will.
Mm-hmm.
So occasionally I'll find myself in the car. If I know I'm in the car for a while, I'll pop that onto the Sirius XM and listen to it, and here we go. But as far as if I want to come home and just put the news on in the background, I don't have much play. I won't put CNN or Fox News on in the background to get my information. That's where I go to the local news, and that's again, little half-hour snippets here and there. But if I really want to get into it, to me, it requires research. You have to go online, have to dig around. I feel like it shouldn't be that way.
I don't totally disagree with you, and so I guess it's worth mentioning where I get my news from. So I have not had cable television since 2007-ish, I think, and basically have maybe that's not entirely true. Maybe 2008. Okay, so let's say around 2008, and I haven't had broadcast television for roughly the same amount of time. So I don't watch news channels at all, basically. In my desperate hatred of social media, I got a Twitter account some years ago, probably around 2013, and what I found immediately is that there was no better way for me to receive information from the utmost local source than Twitter. Following police departments, fire departments, local government authorities, local news reporters, etc., gave me the ability to know on a more granular level what was happening locally. Like, for instance, if there was an automobile accident on the highway between my home and my office, or if there was a wildfire near my home, or whatever it was, those were the things that I could find out about my community in the areas of interest that I couldn't get anywhere else, not even local news, right? Because even here in Denver, we've got a couple of fairly good local news stations, and even the best one is not going to cover all of these little stories because, a motor vehicle accident isn't big news, right? Especially when there's all this stuff going on. So I found that was a very good source for that information. And conversely, on the other end of the spectrum, I listen to NPR almost exclusively, and I get my daily, roughly, because it's not daily anymore, but roughly daily news from NPR. And what I've learned from NPR is that you gain context, and as a reasonably capable individual, I'm able to discern between things. Maybe discern's not the right word, but I see things that maybe I agree with versus things that I disagree with. But I do my very best to take those out of the equation. I try not to involve my opinions in the news being provided with context. And then occasionally, when some, local but more serious event has occurred, I will then tune to like a streaming version of my local news station, and I will watch whatever they're providing. And that is purely facts almost always. It's like, the flood or the fire or the whatever is happening, and this is the moment to moment information that we can provide you with our helicopters and our reporters on the ground, etc. So those are the ways that I get my information. But and I consider myself to be well informed, because when there's something I don't understand, whether it's from Twitter or from NPR, that is not being provided to me through Twitter or NPR, I then go and I do a little bit of research to understand the context that I'm not being given, or a greater context that I'm not being given. And the most important lesson I've learned from all of that is that there is absolutely no reason for most people to know the news all the time. There just isn't. Like, you can take it back, some years and think about the nightly news broadcast or the morning paper, right? You didn't know anything new at noon unless you heard it from somebody who was directly involved. You had to wait till the next morning to read the paper to see what happened. And the nightly news was the same way. You had to wait until the team of reporters and journalists assembled the information for you in that evening broadcast, so that way you could learn what went on. And I believe that's still the better way to get the news, because the up to the minute information is usually, riddled with wrong. And I think the best example of that is when some sort of tragedy occurs, whether it's a mass shooting or a train derailment or a wildfire or a hurricane, when you can see this for yourself. If you go to all of the news stations' websites, you load them simultaneously and you toggle between them, you find that they all have different numbers for the people that are injured or dead, or the height of the flood, or the size of the fire. In the early, bits of any kind of large event, the information is divergent, it's wildly different, and it's often wrong. And there is very little reason to get those numbers and hold on to them, because that within an hour or two they will change. And so I kind of realized, like, why even bother doing that? Just stay away and wait a little bit, unless it's going to have a direct impact and I need to do something about it. Then I need to know, right?
Right.
Now it's your turn to talk.
You've made your point.
I suppose that I have.
Yeah, I get it. I don't feel. I feel like most. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like most people, most Americans, don't. Like, they rely on their one source for information. Or maybe they don't care. I don't know. I really don't. Just based on conversations I've had with people at work or elsewhere, it seems more and more people are less informed. If I feel I'm not informed, right? Mm-hmm. Admittedly, I feel I'm not as informed as I should be. I feel like I'm more informed than a lot of people that I know.
Yeah. So there's I think there's a requirement to being well informed that requires effort. And
yes. And people are inherently lazy or have become.
Yeah, I don't know that they've so much become. I have this belief that we're the same exact people we were 100 years ago. There's just more of us, and we're louder because we have more methods of communication. I don't know if that's true. That's just what I believe. But yeah, I think that there's an effort that is required. Like if you hear a story about the Middle East in whatever capacity, hearing that story about the Middle East, about an event that occurred in the Middle East, means absolutely nothing unless you understand the history of the Middle East. And when you start understanding the history of the Middle East, you can start understanding why things occur in the Middle East the way that they do. Right, wrong, agree or disagree, it doesn't really matter. Just that context, that historical context is important. Like, I think a lot of people believe somehow that we're disconnected from history, but we're not. It is right. We are it's a continuous progression of events that lead to the next set of events. Nothing happens in isolation, with the exception of, a storm, and even then, you could find reasons why and how. So, yeah, I think people are inherently unlikely to go and dig for that information, and I think that people are inherently unlikely to have that information at hand, because they don't believe history is as important as maybe I believe it to be anyway.
Right. And what's amazing is now, in the time that we live in, compared to, say, even 50 years ago. I mean, hell, if I wanted to right now, I wanted to look up the local news in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I could, right? And I could read it every day if I wanted to.
Yeah.
Whereas 50 years ago, living on Long Island, that's going to be incredibly difficult.
It's a lot of work.
Almost impossible to do, right? So we have the capability at our fingertips. It's just wanting to do that, right?
That opens up the can of worms about whether or not the internet was a mistake. With the internet, okay, so
save it for the podcast.
the internet is a tool, like any other tool, and it is up to us to use it properly or not. And I think that, like any other tool that has ever been provided, developed, discovered, invented, we will choose to screw it up or not, and we do.
Maybe that's the problem. We're just incapable of formulating our own opinions, or have become lazy to formulate our own opinions. We just want someone else to do it for us, and we'll take that side.
So, okay, I'll give an example. It's a wild example. It's like way out in left field, and I went to the right here with my hand, but way out in left field.
I was left on my side.
Okay, good. One of the reasons, and I said this to somebody recently in a different conversation, but one of the reasons I left New York was because I felt like there were too many choices, and I was unable to narrow in on a set of choices that made me happy. And so I thought that if I went somewhere that had fewer choices, that I'd be more likely to narrow in on some choices. Now, I don't know if any of that's really true or not, but that's what I thought anyway. And I feel like when people have too many choices to make, they often make no choice. I think there's like you ever heard the term analysis paralysis, where you spend so much time trying to analyze a thing that you do nothing about it?
Yes.
And so with all of the methods that we have to get information and communicate with one another, there's, I think, so many of those options that it might just be easier not to. Or it might be easier to just lazily pick one and roll with it.
Yeah, I think it's a lazy thing.
I think it's a lazy
thing. I think we're all guilty of it. Just some more so than others. Oh, I just got a notification that tomorrow's Indigenous Peoples Day. Did you know that tomorrow's Indigenous Peoples Day?
I
and
suppose
Columbus Day simultaneously.
I suppose that means that it's also Columbus Day. Yeah,
yes.
Which I have long been an advocate to not care about Christopher Columbus.
Yeah.
And if we want to now call it Indigenous Peoples Day, then I'm fine with that. I don't particularly. I shouldn't say I don't care either way. I don't. It's not a day I get off, and I'm not Italian, so I have no pride for Columbus, who ran into the wrong continent.
Yeah, I never understood the whole how it became like the Italian. I know he was Italian, but
it was because he was Italian. I think is really just, and I don't even think he was Italian. I think he was Spanish, and then he got funding through Italy. So he's not even Italian, I think.
No, he was Italian. He got funded through Spain.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah.
Queen Isabella funded him to go exploring.
Yeah.
And find the shorter path to India, and he ended up hitting the wrong side.
He hit the Bahamas, and then suddenly he discovered America, which he didn't, and then all nonsense words. So yeah, whatever.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
I didn't mean to derail you, but
it's fine.
I got 2 notifications that tomorrow's Indigenous Peoples Day, and also Columbus Day.
So I turned all of those off because I don't care about anything.
Yeah,
like I don't
usually
care.
Do too. I don't know why these came up.
Christmas can go to hell. Easter can go to hell. Kwanzaa can go to hell. There's none of them I care about.
Right.
So as far as I'm concerned, every day is just a day of the week, which is sort of sad when you say it out loud, I guess. But also I find I actually find it to be way more rewarding to not care about those things. But that's just me.
About Thanksgiving.
I like Thanksgiving. I like Thanksgiving for the one reason that Thanksgiving has always been the holiday that everybody in the country celebrates and did not come with any expectations other than to spend time with family and friends.
Fair.
Like there was no Thanksgiving gift that was required. Like you didn't have to go Thanksgiving shopping, except you were buying a turkey and food, right?
Food.
Yeah. And even when I was a kid, I felt that way. And like I always got a little upset when Easter turned into like we have to give kids gifts on Easter. I don't know when that happened, but I think it's very strange and silly. And again, Easter was always to me, the holiday where you got together with your family and you ate. And you pretended somehow like you cared about the resurrection of a Messiah, but you didn't, because instead you ate chocolate and held bunnies or some shit.
Yes. You searched for Easter eggs.
and you search for Easter eggs
with candy and coins in them
that come out of the bunny, apparently.
Yes. Apparently.
So if I got Easter right, it's
sweet marketing.
It's Zombie Jesus Day, but we don't want you to think about that. So bunnies lay eggs filled with candy.
We got this mystical bunny that lays eggs with chocolate eggs.
Yeah. Yeah. We should talk about religion on this show one day.
Yeah, all right. Save it for the podcast.
Save it for the podcast. All right, let's ride back around to media and journalism. So I think it is incumbent upon us, and I say us, I mean like the people, to be well informed, which requires a bit of education and a bit of decision making and a bit of work. But that's not going to happen. We're just not going to do that.
No.
Right?
No, we're dumb people.
Across the board, right?
It's yeah.
Like, look, I don't have kids. I'm not married. My life is fairly simple compared to a lot of people, yours especially, and others like you, right? And even with that, I don't have the time nor the patience to engage in all of the noise that exists in the world. So how could anybody be expected to engage in all of the noise that exists in the world if you've got kids, or you've got to take them to school, and you got to go to work, and you got to, you know what I mean? Like you got enough things to worry about. You're just trying to live your life in a peaceful, reasonable manner, and you now have to consider all of these other things. I think that's a lot to ask of people.
It is, but I also feel like people shouldn't. I feel like people are too willing to let the media make the decisions for them, or to let the media influence their thoughts. Right?
Do you think that's an active thing, or do you think that just happens?
Both. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, because I think it's a choice.
I think if you're brought up a certain way, right, and you're raised in to believe certain things, then you're always gonna lean towards those things, right? Because that's all you know, unless all of a sudden you have an epiphany and you decide one day, hey, maybe what I've learned here isn't totally right. Let me look at the other side of things and try to formulate an opinion. There are people who do that, but I feel the vast majority of people just, again, it's the comfort. Hey, this is what I know. This is what I've always known. I'm going to stick with this.
Right. Well, that's just fundamentally true. I mean, period. Like, it's, the I was in a training a lot of years ago, and the instructor said something like, when I was a kid, for Thanksgiving, we would, and they would make a roast, like a beef roast or something. They would cut the end of the roast off before they put it in the oven. And he always wondered why that was a thing. And one day when he got older, he asked his mom, and he's like, Mom, why do we cut the end of the roast off before we put it in the oven? And she's like, I don't know. Ask your grandmother. And so he went and he asked his grandmother, Grandma, why do we take the end of the roast off before we put it in the oven? And she goes, I don't know why we do it now, but when I was younger, the oven wasn't big enough, so we used to cut the end of the roast off to fit it in the oven. And so, like, here's this tradition that existed that everybody was perfectly comfortable repeating, but didn't have the slightest idea of why, but it had started because of like a perfectly practical reason.
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, these things are true, right? These are inherently true, that we will do the thing that we've always done simply because we've always done it.
Yeah, but I don't know. I don't know. Doesn't make it right.
No. Let's call this another wild Marc analogy, but, like just yesterday, I think it was, I opened my fridge. I was making food, and I wanted to use soy sauce. So I pulled out the bottle of soy sauce from the fridge. And at the same time, I wanted to use some sesame oil and some rice vinegar. And so I pulled those off of the shelf. And it like dawned on me, and I'm like, well, why do I keep soy sauce in the refrigerator, but these other things I don't? Like, I don't keep any condiment on the shelf outside, or rather in the refrigerator, like except for like mustard, mayonnaise, and soy sauce. Everything else sits on the counter, and it's perfectly fine. All the hot sauces, all the vinegars, all of that stuff, Worcestershire sauce sits. And I kind of looked at it and I went, why do I do this? I do this because I think that because the soy sauce was once warm and I put it in the fridge to begin with, that taking it out of the fridge and getting it warm again would be bad for the soy sauce. That's why I do it. That's like my thought process. Like, because I've already put it in the fridge, I can't unfridge it.
Right.
But is that even a thing? Like, is that true? Like, will that even matter? I don't know that it will. I just made that up. I made that assumption.
Right.
And now I'm sticking with it. Now, this is not an important thing, soy sauce being in the fridge. This is completely meaningless. But it was that moment that I went, here's the reason why you do this thing. And that reason is not based on anything other than some opinion you formulated for no apparent reason. And you're not changing it. Like, I could take the soy sauce out of the fridge and put it on the counter and see what happens. Likely nothing. But I'm not going to. I'm going to keep putting that soy sauce in the fridge. That's just the way it's happening, and I'm not going to stop.
Now, see, I wonder how many people are capable of that thought process, though.
What, why I do the thing? Oh, why I do the thing? I don't know.
Do people actually question, like, I find myself, the older I get, and it's happened more now that I have kids, I question everything in my head, even things that I've learned.
Yeah.
And I see my daughter go to school, and they're teaching her about Columbus Day and all these things, and I'm thinking to myself, do I tell her that he's not the greatest thing in the world?
Are they still teaching that he's a great thing?
Somewhat. I think they've toned it back a bit, but it's still there.
Okay.
And this year's been like before the whole pandemic thing. I was actually kind of excited for this year because it's the fourth grade, and this is when they start really learning proper things and things. I like history, and so I was excited to go through that phase with her. And now that her schedule is weird, whatever, it's not as exciting as I thought it would be. But I question myself a lot when she's going to start to come home and bring things, American history and world history, and remembering what I was taught, and then as I got older, learning that some of those things were just wrong, flat out, yeah, just wow. Do I tell her? Do I say, well, honey, I know the school's telling you this, but you should know that this is actually what happened, or this guy is not the greatest guy in the world.
So what do you do in those situations? Do you choose to interject, or do you just let it happen?
I'm going to choose to interject. Like she's old enough now that she can understand. And I'll teach her to work the system, obviously. Hey, right, honey, the school answer is this, but you should know that realistically this is what happened.
I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. She needs to learn the way of the world. You have to work the system. But you should always know that what's being fed to you isn't always right. And now that you have the capability to do some more research independently and easily, you should dig around. It's useful.
That's an important lesson, I think.
Yeah, I don't want to influence her. I want her to formulate her own opinion.
Well, I was going to say, it's not about whether or not Columbus was a douche or not. It's about her understanding that there are other pieces of information for you to consider, which is true for everything, right? There's very few things in the world that are purely one set of views.
It's critical thinking. It's hey, just because someone's telling you this, you should always question it and examine it and prove it for yourself. I mean, I feel like that's what I feel like a lot of people, most people, a vast majority, don't do that.
Well, I mean, okay, so why would the very same people that we have decided are too lazy or dumb or whatever the reason is to not go and get the real news or the real information or context, why would they simultaneously then teach their children critical thinking?
They wouldn't.
Right.
That's why we have this continuous cycle of idiocy, unfortunately.
Right. So here's a question. Do you believe that this thing that we've just identified, right? The general disinformation of society through laziness or whatever it is. Do you think that that's a new thing? Or do you think that this has always existed, but we're able to identify it now because there's more of us with a bigger, more complex and easy method to communicate? I said complex and easy in the same sentence, but I think everybody knows what I mean.
It's probably always existed, I guess. It just seems more prevalent now because the people who do question things have more. I don't know. You stumped me on this one.
Well, I mean, like I said earlier, my belief is that we haven't changed. We just have a new method, right? So
right.
you could take the internet and you can compare it to the printing press, and you could say that before the printing press, there was basically no means for people to communicate information to one another besides storytelling and memory. And maybe like carvings on caves and things like that, right? But then, or I should say in a big way, because people were still able to handwrite texts and documents. But once the printing press came around, it made it easier for people to not only have access to information, but also to put information out. And, through the printing, I mean, the number one book that was distributed via the printing press was the Bible. And the printing press allowed for things like Shakespeare and Voltaire and Mein Kampf.
Right.
So like all of it.
You got to accept the good with the bad,
right? And so the tool was made available and people used the tool, and with that came good and bad. And I don't believe that the internet is any different than that, except it's just way more pervasive. You still had to go buy a book or get a book from somebody or write a book to print it to get it sent out. Whereas today, I mean, like you said, you could read the news in Buenos Aires every single day. I could send a text message to somebody in Buenos Aires right now and get an immediate video of what's happening in Buenos Aires right this second.
Right.
That's not a thing that happened 30 years ago.
No?
No. I mean, this is a new phenomenon that we're still adjusting to and learning how to use.
Yeah. But I don't know. I just feel like it's this new thing, but it's so dynamic, right? I mean, it gives you the opportunity to look for more and get more information, and
right.
You have everything at the tip of your fingers, but if you don't have that level of critical thinking to be able to filter it for yourself, I feel like that's where the danger comes in.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Because I could read, even with all COVID-19, right? When this whole thing first happened.
Yeah.
I was on the internet all over the place, reading all types of different articles, and it ran the gamut from you're going to die immediately to you're not going to die immediately. You have to be, you have these, if you have underlying symptoms, blah, 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 and wear a mask. You gather the information and I formulated my own thought process on it, right? I know I didn't rely on the news to tell me. I didn't rely on CNN to tell me to do this or Fox News. I did some information digging. I looked at all the aspects of it. I looked at the crazy conspiracy theories, and I looked at the science, and I formulated my own thought process. And that's how I set the rules for family and how we're going to conduct ourselves and how we're going to try to avoid getting sick. I feel like people don't take the time or the energy to do that.
Okay, let me ask you a question related to that. Do you think you have or had an underlying understanding of the way things work with relation to an infectious disease? Like, did you understand some basic fundamentals about how that works before this happened?
Yes.
Okay. So you had a foundation of information, a foundation of knowledge that was based off of things you had learned previously about how things work in the world.
Right.
And then you picked all of the information that you had in front of you, and you picked through it, and based on that underlying knowledge, you made yourself a decision and formed your opinion on the matter. So what if the same person had zero understanding of how infectious diseases work, and then all of a sudden was bombarded with the information about the pandemic? Or better yet, what if somebody had incorrect information about how infectious diseases work as a foundation of their knowledge, and then was given all the information? Where would those people go with it?
Probably not to a good place.
Probably not to a good place, right? And so I think that's like you can claim that you're not well informed, but the simple fact that you can claim that you're not well informed means you're probably better informed than most people. Because like you said about me and the soy sauce, is like the fact that you're even able to be conscious about the fact that you're not well informed means that you know more than most, because you're able to identify that something is amiss because of whatever reason, but you have a foundational knowledge. So people without a foundational knowledge, or with the wrong foundational knowledge, will take bits of information and will connect dots that aren't to be connected. And there's an old saying that says causation, or rather correlation, isn't causation. Just because two things seem to line up, or just because you can see two things, doesn't mean that they are related to one another or that one caused the other. It just means that they are two things that you can see. And when you have bits of information being thrown at you with no historical context and with no knowledge base, the human mind automatically says, well, clearly I'm going to go from here to there, because why not? And I'm going to draw that line, and I'm going to zigzag my way through these points of information, and I will draw my conclusion, just like you did, but in their case, without a base of knowledge or historical context, and therefore, more often than not, they get it wrong.
So now, do you think this is an educational thing, or just some people are better at critical thinking than others? And
it's probably a little bit of both. It's probably, so that old nature versus nurture conversation, I think it's probably both. I think there's always going to be somebody that no matter how much information you feed them, they're not interested or not capable. But I think as a broader scope, I think there's a lack of thirst for knowledge. And I don't attribute that to people necessarily. I attribute that to the systems that we have in place in our society that take advantage of the weaknesses of people. So where I go on my conspiracy theory is, and it's not a conspiracy theory so much as it is the way I view, as you mentioned earlier, the game, is that, in a broader spectrum, in a broader scope, I believe that the job of a group is to maintain and grow. Any group, whether it's a religion, a political group, a group of friends, whatever it is, it's to maintain the integrity of that group and to grow that group. And in our society, we have some very specific interests that operate around us. And the most important is in quotes, but the most prevalent is business. And business's goal under any circumstance is to maintain and grow the size of the business. And through that, they utilize tools like advertising, marketing, information, misinformation, influence politically, influence societally, influence in whatever sphere of business that they're operating in. They will exert their influence, because at the end of the day, every single one of us, you, me, and the other guy, are all consumers of their products or services. And their intent and goal is to get us to believe in them and spend money on them. And when that occurs, they exert their influence on us and take advantage of our weaknesses, not because they're evil or because there's somebody out there pulling the strings going, haha, we're going to mess with all of them. No, but because we are creatures who have some pretty obvious traits, and it's pretty easy to manipulate those traits to be able to get what you want out of them. And so I think that the move toward, and here's where I use my scapegoats, social media and reality TV are ways to confuse and distract people in society away from more important, reasonable things, so that way you are more likely to buy something from an advertisement than you are to sit and watch a video about American history. And if you don't make an active choice to go seek out information that interests you, then you will make a passive choice to receive information that stimulates you just enough so that way you don't have to do anything else. So I don't blame people, because I think we're just dumb. I think we're dumb monkeys who learned how to swing from tree to tree and not much else. And now we're sitting. I mean, for fuck's sakes, dude. Think about what's happening right this very second. You and I are having a conversation via video phone on machines that have bits inside of them that transmit our voices and faces across the internet. What the hell? And we're thousands of miles away from one another. What the hell is that even? Do you think that the biological evolution of humanity is like capable of fully assimilating to that wildness? I don't. I think this is voodoo. This is magic.
It's like the Jetsons.
It's like it's like the Jetsons.
The future is now.
And so if you took somebody 30 years ago and you dropped them in this time, 30 years ago, not 100, not 500, not even 1,000 years, 30 years ago, and you dropped them into this moment right now, they wouldn't be able to hold a conversation. They'd be too busy going, wow, look at that. Holy shit. You can see me? I think we're just dumb monkeys. And there's a couple of us who are able to take advantage of our dumb monkeyness.
No, I don't like to look at it that way.
No? What do you got?
No. I don't think we're dumb monkeys. I think we're actually quite intelligent monkeys.
Okay.
That's why we're capable of doing this while the monkeys are still swinging from the trees.
Fair.
I just think people don't use their critical thinking enough. And I don't know if it's something that's just not taught in schools. I mean, not even when I say that, I think back to when I was in school.
No, they didn't
taught me critical thinking.
No, you said that to me not that long ago, and I was like, nobody taught me that.
Yeah, they just spoon feed you the shit, and you gotta you figure it out for yourself. And you either have an inquisitive personality to say, well, that doesn't sound right, or
or you get distracted by the shiny thing.
I'm gonna go look that up, look further into that because I don't like the way that sounds.
Right.
Or you get distracted by the shiny thing and say, I don't care.
So, taking advantage of the dumb monkeys who get distracted by the shiny things.
Well, then, God damn it, there's too many fucking dumb monkeys in this country.
Well, I mean, look, here's the thing, right? So I have found myself, I'm we're both 40 something, and I have found myself over the years learning about business, and now I'm in sales. I do sales. I sell people things. I sell people things they don't need. And maybe they want them, but they don't really want them. I convince them that they need them. And I come at it from this position of like, I'm going to be honest and I'm going to tell the truth. And I do. I don't bullshit people into buying things they don't want or need. I tell them the truth. I let them make their decision, and I find it to be rather successful. But at the same time, I have identified that I am capable, maybe good, maybe bad, I don't know. I am capable of getting people to do what I want more often than not.
You are pretty good at that.
And so I use that to my advantage. And I if I find myself in a situation where somebody has an objection to the thing I'm trying to sell them, I can come up with another reason why they should have it. And they go, well, excellent. I shall have that. And that's me manipulating them. It really is.
You're the monkey manipulator.
I'm the monkey manipulator. So I mean, I use my ability to manipulate people. That's my job, is to manipulate people's brain into doing what I want them to do, whether or not it's good for them, whether or not I care. I can make up I can pretend to be altruistic and genuine and maybe I am being that, but at the end of the day, I am just trying to manipulate them. And so when I discovered that about myself, what I realized is that I may be like pretty good at it, but man, there must be some people out there who are really good at it.
Excellent at it.
Like super good. Like that's the thing that they do every day. And they do it probably without even realizing that they're doing it.
There's a guy in the White House who's excellent at it.
Isn't it extraordinary? Like
amazing.
And yeah.
I always say that to the people who are, the anti-Trumpers, the crazies and all that stuff. I always say, look, I don't like the guy. I think he's an idiot. But you have to admire what he was able to accomplish. And just, if you look at it from just an outside 30,000 foot view of what he was able to do, it's pretty fucking incredible. I mean, it doesn't say much for us as a people, but the fact that he was able to, he became president of the United States. He went from reality TV guy to the most powerful man in pretty much the world. He was able to manipulate.
I go back to the sort of the argument of like us being dumb monkeys or not, right? I believe everything lives on a scale, on a spectrum, right? And there is no black or white. There is no 0 or 100. Everything is a scale within that. And everybody lives within that scale. And there are some really, really dumb people in the world, and there are some really, really smart people in the world, and there are a bunch of people in the middle, kind of like leaning toward dumb or leaning toward smart, right? And there's some people right smack in the middle that are just, you know what I mean? Like and I believe that's true of everything, right? Whatever the case. And when I was a kid, I remember going to the grocery store with my mom and seeing the tabloids on the end caps at the registers, and looking back on it now, the way I put it is that, why are those things there? And I realized over the years they're there because people buy them, not because some evil thing is putting them out there to ruin people. It's because there is a subset of the population who believes that there is a bat boy. Because when I was a kid, the most vivid memory was the black and white picture of the bat boy.
Yes.
You remember the bat boy?
Of course, who doesn't?
Who doesn't remember the Bat Boy? And I remember like going back to the grocery store a couple of weeks later, and I remember
it was the Bat Boy, and it was also Elvis is still alive.
Elvis is still alive. I remember asking my mom at one point, like, if there were really a Bat Boy, how come nobody else is talking about this? And my mom went, I don't know, and she just dismissed me. And I remember thinking, like, going back like the week later, and I'm like, so there's still that same magazine is still there, and there's still a picture of the Bat Boy, but none of the other magazines are talking about the Bat Boy. And how come nobody's talking about the Bat Boy? Wait a minute, how do you even get a Bat Boy? None of this makes any sense to me, and I'm so confused because like it seems like it'd be really big news if there were an actual Bat Boy. And he'd be on TV, right, and there'd be movies about him, and we would all want to know the Bat Boy. But nobody else was talking about just this one black and white picture of the Bat Boy, and there was nothing else. And so it occurred to me, like we have these things because people are dumb enough to buy them, whether they believe them or whether they think it's entertaining or whatever the reason is, they buy them and they want them. So the point I'm trying to make is that there are enough dumb ones for somebody as bad as Donald Trump. And I say bad not because he's evil, but bad because he's really not that good at manipulating people. All he really knows how to do is pick a couple of little bits of fear and then make a lot of noise. But there are enough dumb people out there to be able to fall for little bits of fear and a lot of noise that it worked. And it's what's amazing about that is that nobody else tried that like him before. That's what to me is interesting. And so like, you could say, oh, he's some kind of genius that he was able to do that with so many people. I wonder though if that's just the way that he is, and it just so happened that there were enough people that the way that he is worked with enough people. Like I think it's sort of like he exists in nature, And therefore, I don't know this to be true, of course. This is just my speculation on him, because I don't think him to be an evil genius. I think he's just got this trait that seems to work because there are enough dumb people.
No, he's calculated, man. He knows what he's doing. I don't think he's an evil genius, but I think he knows how to manipulate and work the system.
Do you think
he's a businessman?
Do you think he's conscious of it, though?
Yes, absolutely.
Do you think he's fully conscious of
1,000%. Look at the fucking propaganda video he had them film as soon as he got back to the White House.
Yeah, standing on the
balcony.
balcony.
It was like an action flick. Did you see it with
Yeah.
the music in the background, the dramatic helicopter? I mean, it was like.
Yeah, but so do you think? Okay,
that was planned, man. That wasn't just a spontaneous thing. I'm sure that was being worked on when he was at Walter Reed. And,
Okay, so we've hit a much deeper thing. We've in an effort to try to understand journalism and media and how they impact us today, really what we've talked about is the human condition and how people can manipulate others and how others can be so easily manipulated. And I would argue that our journalism has become conflated with our media, and we don't know how to separate the two. And I argue that that's because we are incapable of being able to put any of it into context, and I don't know why.
Neither do I. It's just, I think that's just the way we've evolved, I guess. What scares me is if we continue down this path, the future scares me.
Well, I think
It really does.
I think that's exactly the goal. If somebody is going to try to manipulate you, there are two pretty good ways to do it. They can either instill fear in you and get you to make decisions based on that fear, or they can instill hope in you and get you to make decisions based on that hope. And either one of those two things are purely emotional. And you could decide all of the rationale, you could make up all of the things that say, oh, I've calculated this decision. But at the end of the day, both of those things are pure emotion, and there's no way out.
No way out.
This is the game.
Who's running the game?
We are.
We who?
All of us, collectively, at the same time.
Fascinating.
Yeah, there is nobody running the game. Somebody asked me, not somebody, my girlfriend, my lovely girlfriend asked me the other day, was it Sammy Hagar or David Lee Roth that died? I always get the two mixed up. Anyway, the one that died.
Neither.
Who's the one that died?
Alex Van Halen? No,
Van Halen.
Van Halen,
Yeah,
one of the two.
All right, whatever. They're all the same. She's like, Trump is fine, but Van Halen's dead. Who's making these decisions? And my response was, how come I can eat 14 sausages in one sitting and children starve? No one is making these decisions. Because literally not that long ago, I sat and I ate 14 sausages in a sitting.
Why would you do such a thing?
Because I can, and I wanted to.
I understand. My God, it's a lot of sausage.
I know. I forget what the math was, but I did the math, and it was like I don't know, it was like 18 feet of sausage or something like that I consumed in one sitting. Yeah, no, it was totally unreasonable, and I'm the first one to be able to admit that, but I was delighted with myself, and now I can say I ate 14 sausages in one sitting.
What was the aftermath of that?
I felt terrible.
Okay, good.
And there was a great deal of poop.
I would expect so.
Yeah.
Did you time yourself? Was it like 2 sausages every minute or?
No, I didn't. I just.
What was the breakdown?
When I was done with one, I started on the next. I was chain sausaging. I lit one sausage with the other. I mean, I did slow down after a while, but I didn't take really breaks. I was eating sausage. It was a sausage. It was a sausage day.
Were you by yourself?
No, I actually I had invited a friend, and we sat on my deck.
Okay.
And we grilled sausages, and so I think he had like 11 or something, and I had 14.
It's a lot of sausage, man.
I had planned a sausage day.
It's pretty ridiculous. I've had like 2 or 3.
You could have more. I know you could.
Pretty full.
Yeah. Look, there's nothing reasonable about it. I've done some pretty ridiculous things when it comes to food in the past.
This is true.
You've watched them.
I have the whole chicken burrito in 2 bites, 3 bites.
It was 6. It was 6.
6 bites?
It was 6 bites, but it was a fully packed Chipotle burrito. It was not a small burrito. It was a very large.
The chicken was the most impressive.
Eating the whole chicken?
The whole chicken was still etched in my mind.
There
was nothing left of that thing but bone.
Well, I mean, that's the only thing you can't eat, and even then, maybe you can eat some of it. My favorite part about the whole chicken was how it started and how it ended. I remember challenging Angel to a chicken eating contest, and it was because it was the meal from the Colombian restaurant. It was a whole chicken, like a pound of potatoes, a thing of beans, a thing of rice, and it was like $20. It was an amazing deal. The food was delicious. So I said, let's get 2 of these, and let's see what happens. And I remember finishing Angel's food after I finished mine.
You had a chicken off.
I had a chicken off. And the best part about it is that for anybody who doesn't know, Angel is a much larger man than I am. And not only did I shame Angel because I finished my food and he didn't, but then I went on to finish his food for him.
Yeah.
And that was the joy of the chicken off for me.
It's pretty impressive.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thanks for joining us on this week's podcast. The most important lesson I've learned is 14 sausages is not as impressive as a whole chicken. Thanks for joining us on today's podcast.